Bam Pow Comic Car with your hosts, Andrew Glonner
and Chris Ramos
and featured guest host,
Ruben Narjera.
All right, Ruben, thank you for joining us. Ruben is excited to tell us all about his comic book adventures and stuff, and he is a writer of one of the upcoming Archie Comics spin-offs that's coming out tomorrow. Actually, it's called The Best Archie Comic Ever, and we're excited to have him join us for the podcast.
bold title with lots of expectations. So we're ready for that.
Thank you for having me on the show. First off, I appreciate you guys. I dig the show. I actually got this is my little advance copy. It's beautiful.
Oh, that's great.
It'll be in stores tomorrow. This is the cover A, of course. This is the Tim Seeley cover, and then there's a Tom Whalen cover B. I'm really juiced on this because check it out. I also got I bought this when I saw I had the chance to. So Tim Seeley still does the original it's not digital. You know what I mean? So when I found out this existed, I contacted his art dealer and I bought this. This is the actual cover A. I was like,
oh my gosh,
man, this is going on my wall. So
absolutely.
So you got the blue pencil with the ink on it.
Inks.
Everything. Awesome.
Wow.
That is great.
I gotta get
too.
That's pretty monumental.
It is, yeah. Because I'm such a big Archie goes super deep in my roots, growing up. So this is my first full Archie release with them. I wrote a couple stories with them actually, but this is my first of the releases. And so it's really monumental for me. And so I really wanted to have the original art. So when I saw the chance, I just I bought it,
Absolutely. That's pretty exciting and congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Of all the places for it to hang, that's the spot, right?
That is, yeah.
So Ruben, why don't you tell us a little bit about you are a comic book store owner, you're a comic book writer, you're just living it and in it, and all the way over in California, and of course we're in Wisconsin. So great to connect. But why don't you tell us a little bit about how this all started with you, and kind of your comic book origin is what we look for.
Tell us your origin story.
Yeah. So the first comic book I ever owned that I bought, but was a hand-me-down to me, was a Spectacular Spider-Man that my grandmother had on a washer dryer in the garage. And it was really beaten up and it was missing a staple and it was thrashed. And it's this cover that had Tombstone pounding Spider-Man. He's just chained up on
would that been the McFarlane era? Or was that?
Close.
Okay, pretty that.
But,
okay, yeah.
But to this day, I still don't know whose comic that is. So, but my grandmother's she's you can have it, and I don't even know whose it is, And that was my first comic, and I was hooked, the stories inside. And so, following that, when we'd go to the stores and we'd be at the checkout aisle, growing up, we financially didn't really have much, you know what I mean? So, the candy was the thing we could get. We couldn't get a toy from the toy aisle because it was too expensive. But when we were at checkout, you could get a candy or whatnot. And my brother would pick his candy, and I would start to opt for the comics. And the comics that were in the checkout lane, they weren't comics. It was those Archie digests.
Oh, okay, yeah, absolutely.
And so that was the first comics that I actually bought. That I got to pick were Archie. And they're there at the checkout. They had if you remember them, they just have so much material packed in one punch, and back in those times, kind of dating myself here, but there was no iPhones, there was no, there was no digital, any of that stuff. So when we'd be crossing back from Mexico back to the US, because I spent a lot of my time going back and forth to both countries. Most of my family lived over there.
Okay.
You'd be 3 or 4 hours crossing back in the line in La Línea right here. And the Mexico border to cross to Mexicali. And that was my entertainment. I'd be reading that thing back and forth, trying to draw, sketch.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
I used the heck out of that book every day. I would even take out pages and paste them and make little scenes with the characters, to make my own stories. So
that's super creative. Yes. Yeah.
So to go full circle from that, and then now be writing Archie and get to etch my story in the pantheon of, because a lot of people aren't aware of it, but Archie's been around for 80 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I was looking up. It was started in 1942, right? So that's huge.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Archie actually, it's the really funny thing about Archie, not to just jump in, but Archie has been like a bestseller like forever. You start looking at what is the sales numbers of publications, and they of course go through all the other publishers, but then they're like, oh, and by the way, Archie also had like the best month in this whole year. It's like, wow, Archie's still cranking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Wow.
Yeah, it's a legacy brand, It's just
Mhm.
and it'll keep going. I mean, not too far in the future, we'll be saying Archie 100-year anniversary, and that's wow,
Wow, yeah.
it's pretty wild. So that's gonna
Exactly.
happen. So
That's incredible.
it's pretty amazing to be a part of this and of this company, and everyone that I got to work with on the project's been stellar. My editor Jamie Lee, she's fantastic. Love working with her. On my in this story, actually, the best Archie comic ever. It's 3 stories in one. It's a one shot, which is beautiful because like you don't have to like collect them all or anything. You could just buy that one issue.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's just very easy to access and dive into, and you don't really have to know the backstories of the characters. It's a fun like 3 different story part. And so like my story is about Betty and Veronica as like super spy secret agents.
Oh, ha!
And so
That's fine.
yeah, it takes place in an opera house, and it's called Operatives. So it's like agents. Yeah.
Well, so you're keeping with
like-
the Archie, a tradition of just playing on words. And,
Yeah.
that's the other fun thing is Archie's always been sort of this introductory comic book. It has full stories. So you're not like you said, you're not like, oh, geez, where do I start with reading Batman? And they're like, oh, yeah, Batman's 80 years old. You got to read all these other comics, And Archie at least starts with characters that are, at least if you don't know all the little intricacies of the characters, you at least kind of know generally Betty and Veronica and Archie and Jack. You just know them. It's just like knowing Scooby-Doo, or just knowing, it's just part of the culture, pop culture. It's just what it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, it truly is pop culture. I mean, if there's a Hall of Fame of characters, without question, they got to be some of the first that get inducted up there.
Yeah. Absolutely.
The working on this was a blessing because there were numerous stories that I wrote. This is just one of them. So I have a couple stories in the pipeline, but this is the one that we hit off for this because this was very like. This is like a blockbuster movie of a comic book.
Absolutely.
Really what it is.
Yeah.
Thus the name, the best Archie comic ever.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean?
It definitely like hits you like pow.
Yeah. The cover just like explodes. I mean, like it's literally like an explosion of like the characters coming at you. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So like
awesome.
They keep the Archie name nice and big at the top too. It's always, and that's what you pick up on is like Archie. Like, oh yeah.
And so I went to Free Comic Book Store the other day in town here, and I got the free,
the
best one, and I got to see your cover in it, and I seen your name. I was like, hey, I'm gonna be talking to that guy. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And just kind of. It was a good overview of like all the different types of like Archie comics that are going to be coming out as well, which I thought was interesting.
Art styles.
There's a lot.
There's
a lot coming.
Yeah.
So the preview in that one that you're holding, that's the one that's the story. That's the Pure Heart story. So Pure Heart is like the Archie Superman.
Yeah.
And that one's the one that's done by Fred Van Lent and Tim Seeley. That's their story that you see previewed in there.
Cool.
So which both of them are big names in their own, like, you know what I mean? Like they've done a ton of things. I think Tim Seeley's doing like the whole Gwenom thing, right? The Spider Gwen thing over at Marvel right now. That's like a current project.
Yeah, I think he's on something like that. I know him through like Nightwing. He was on Nightwing and Robin.
Yeah,
he was on Nightwing. Yeah.
So that's how I.
And he's been jumping just all over as far, putting his little mark on things. And a lot of times that's what they do is they take the artists and writers and they just say, hey, let's boost this title over here. Let's bring you over here and just give a little flair to it.
Yeah.
He's just one of those artists. I think that they're just crisp. It's great.
Yeah. So how did Archie Comics find you?
So actually I've been writing for like a long time. So
cool.
Even before I broke into like comics, I was an action sports writer because in my 20s I skated professionally, and then I was already writing because I've never stopped writing. And so I started writing articles for action sports. There's like probably 7 or 8 different action sports things I wrote for, everything from like Power Edge magazine to EXPN, which was like, it's ESPN, but EXPN. There was a point in time where they were trying to be like extreme when the X Games was bigger, you know?
The X Games.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. So I wrote articles for all that. I wrote articles for like a bunch of things. Like I would break the press on a lot of things because I was in the industry very much so how like a retired basketball player will be like, what do they call them? Like a sports coordinator, be talking about like, you know, the flashbacks and stuff like that. Right. And so I was writing but I was also writing my stories. So I was writing scripts to short films, and then I would make a couple short films. Like I did something for Jim Henson. And then I did a fun Star Wars fan film, and Lucasfilm let us use some of their music. So I was always writing stuff.
Okay.
And then I would write comics, and then I would pitch my stories to different publishers. But the writing a comic book script is completely different than writing scripts for everything else I was writing. And so the stuff I was writing was like too long, you know, and it was not the correct format. It was not the correct way. And along the way, I learned from some people, like, you know, this is too much. And I would put all this work for something that would maybe get rejected, and it was too much work, right? Or I wasn't writing it correctly. And so I eventually, you know, I did studies, I read books, I took classes at the Kubert School.
Oh, that's awesome.
Sure.
Yeah, I took classes at the Kubert School online. That really helped a lot. My instructor was Amy Chu, who's like, she's written on Red Sonja, and she's wonderful. And I learned a lot from her. And then a lot of the alumni or special guests that would come in to teach us, I learned a lot from them. I continued to reach out to a lot of them and learn from them, and essentially just harness the craft and got it down to do things the correct way. So when I would do my pitches, they were done correctly, and I would get them done more efficiently and quicker, and got right to the point. And also I learned with comics, a lot of people don't realize, but like your interior artist is like a writer in themselves. And so in script writing, whereas you have to tell the actor like exactly more or less what they have to do, and the scene has to be this way because that's the way you wrote it. In comics, you got to be lenient. You got to leave the spaces there, because you have all these panels on a page, but they're the artists. Maybe they could fit 3 panels in one image. You know what I mean? Maybe they can convey the story differently. And so
had a lot of writers telling us that exact same thing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like it's,
and
just
so I wasn't,
way.
Yeah, in the beginning, I wasn't doing that because I was so used to the format of film and television pilots and short films and stuff like that. And they are not the same. It's a whole different ballgame altogether. So I learned how to correctly do it. And honestly, I prefer, you know, writing the comic scripts because it's like this fun, there's a little more openness to them, and it lets me bounce ideas and be, you know, more creative. And sometimes there's surprises that the artists bring that I'm like, wow, like I like that more.
Yeah,
or like,
you get like a stroke of inspiration there.
Exactly.
Yeah, like, I didn't necessarily think of that, but we can add that.
Yeah, or let's go this direction, or this is looking great. You know what I mean? Or don't change that at all, or add this, or like we can it's almost like a jam band. You know what I mean? Like we're learning a song together sometimes. Like this is what the song has to like get to from point A to point B, but let's kind of like paint the picture till we get there. And so I had to learn how to do that. And once I did that, because in the beginning I would pitch a lot of scripts, but you know, I wasn't really getting things into certain places. And so it came to a point where I started doing indie comics. And I put out a couple indie things. I wrote like an independent comic book for a convention in Arizona called UmaCon. And that book was called Illegal Aliens. And it was about an alien that crash lands near like the Mexican border, and they become like buddies, you know, and help each other.
Wow, that's super interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And then after I wrote some stuff for Dave Garcia, who does PandaCon. I wrote the PandaCon story for him, and that was like a more recent one. And PandaCon is a spinoff of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He had his own action figure and stuff. Yeah, he was that panda samurai looking warrior toy. Any of you know the Ninja Turtle toys?
Yeah.
And so I wrote that, and then I did that for a local convention. I wrote another short story for that, and so I was always writing stories. And then I got these pitches together, and I'd sent some scripts to Archie, and back then I actually sent some, and they didn't go anywhere, you know, it didn't get picked up. But then in the new formats I was writing, I was able to pitch more different stories, and that's when one of the editors really dug my direction and some of the stories, and then we went from there. And that's fantastic. My editor is awesome at Archie, Jamie Lee. Shout out to her. She's wonderful. She was actually a prior writer on Betty and Veronica. So getting to work with her was cool. It was kind of like she passed the torch, and I got to, work with someone who knew the world of Betty and Veronica very, very well.
Well, and it's kind of cool too that like you said that the world of Archie and all of the Archie comics and the publishers, that they're all still like just as active and just as involved in like the history of Archie.
Oh yeah.
I was just pulling up, like, my daughter's a big Archie fan, and we have the best of Archie comics, the deluxe editions, like the
Nice.
hardcovers ones. There's 4 volumes, and it's kind of cool because each one does the same thing. Like Archie is sort of all encompassing, right? Like it's years and years and years. So then what they do in those books is it like takes a couple stories from like the 50s, a couple stories from the 60s, a couple stories from the 70s, a couple stories from the 80s, and it just shows, number one, like how much the artwork changes and the looks of the characters and things, and just the type of stories, like just the way that Archie approaches things. But you've never lost like that, like comedic timing or like the feel of it or the story. They always
everyday
kept
life, that relatableness.
Yeah, like they kept that sort of quirkiness throughout, no matter what decade. And it's funny, you can grab an Archie comic from the 50s and you can grab an Archie comic from the 80s, and they still have that like feel with the sort of the way that the characters, they never really broke away from their original mold. So it's kind of fun that they just sort of adapted a little bit, but not like totally. So it's really good collections. And they're like super affordable. It's like hundreds of pages for like $15, $20. Yeah, really, really great.
That's one of the reasonings why when I was a kid and I chose that over the candy, where it was like, okay, go for it. Because even the value, what you got for the value was incredible. Yeah. Because I didn't know it then, but I was reading reprinted stories. Right. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I didn't know that, but I didn't care. You know what I mean? Because I didn't understand that Archie had already been around for, 50 years before that. You know what I mean? So like, I just had fun reading them, and they're just classic. It's a legendary brand. It always will be. Nothing can take that away from it. They've been around for so long, and in so many different iterations too. I mean, there's different stuff. It's weird, like you're saying, like Archie is Archie, but they're also not afraid to take risks. You know what I mean? There's been some radical things through the years where you're like, man, that's really cool. Like they did the Archie with the Ramones and the B-52s not too long ago. Okay. Back in the day, some people don't know, there was an Archie versus Punisher book. You know what I mean? That's a real
I've heard
thing
that. That's like that happened.
Like, wasn't there an Archie and Batman, right?
Yeah,
there could have been.
Yeah, and then of course Sabrina and everyone else that was introduced in there, they brought them and pulled them out into other stories. You don't realize how many people just sort of had that little tiny introduction in Archie and then eventually moved on to their own. Yeah. No, it's a lot of fun. And the way that we have approached the podcast is looking not necessarily for like what's totally groundbreaking out there, but just like what is the meaning and the feel of comics to everyone, right? Yeah. So like if for me, you had mentioned the first comic that you saw when you went to like the comic shop, or just the one that drew your eye. I had always been pulling like comics here and there and reading them, and the same thing. We didn't really have that much money to like buy comics all the time. So I wasn't surrounded by comics when I was a kid, but I was aware of them, and I'd like to just sort of, I was one of those like readers at the spinner, mom would be like, we're going grocery shopping. I'll be like, I'll be up at the spinner. And then you just pull comics off of that. Yeah. Someday I'll get a spinner. They're like expensive now, but I'll get one.
We just sold one at our store. Someone bought our spinner rack. Yeah.
Wow. See, they're awesome. But I remember the Spider-Man annual. I just had to look it up too. Spider-Man annual number 21, which is published in 1987. It was the wedding. Yeah, the wedding of Peter Parker and Mary Jane.
I remember that.
And on the cover is literally just like them standing in their wedding gown and their tuxedo and Spider. And I just remember, I don't know why, but like it's one of my most vivid memories of just like they do weddings in comics. Like for
everyday
kids,
things happen in a comic.
Yeah, like you think it's just like Superman smashing through buildings all day long, but then you're like, they're doing weddings, like they have kids, like they have lives, like things are. Yeah. So to me, that was like a big eye opener as far as comics go. For me, it was like, wow, like they are doing everyday stories. So when people say, "Oh, read this book or watch this movie or this is, this is life," and all, it's like there's still like life in comics. And Archie always tied into that. It was just like Archie for, just connected with kids at that Archie age, which has been like, how Batman's been like in his 40s for like 80 years.
Yeah. They've been stuck in high school.
Archie is just like, I don't know. He is connected to the people, the kids, and they either see him as someone they're growing into, or they see him as someone who they are, or they see him as someone who they want to go back to.
Absolutely.
That's what it is. Let's go back to the Archie days. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so funny you say that. I remember,
life. Yeah.
I remember as a little kid, seeing Superman, Clark Kent, like in the comics, and like he would, you put the glasses on, you take it off, and then even as a little kid, I was like wanting to pull my hair. I was like, how do you not know it's Superman? What's going on here? Like,
it's not possible.
Right? I knew it.
It's so funny. Yeah, like as a little kid, even I was thinking that you were saying like how Batman's been the same age all that time.
Right.
That Spider-Man book that you're talking about, if I remember correctly, it has a variant. There's two versions of it. There's a version where it's Peter Parker in the tux, and there's a version where it's literally Spider-Man in the suit.
Oh, okay.
It's an early version of a variant, like before variants became a thing. It's one of the first.
They just spun it around for a little bit, but
sure.
Yeah, I remember. I wish I would have picked it up. I never actually owned that one, but because then I really, really kind of fell into comics in like 1989 more so. So this was just one of those like, aha moments for me of like, what the heck? These comics are all over the place. And it's funny because when you look at like old photos of comic shops or old photos of spinners at that time in the 80s, they had like every comic. They had like space comics and like pirate comics. They had like Elf Quest, and they have all sorts of stuff.
Everything.
You're like, man, it was just like, pick your poison, like whatever you want to come read. Like that's what it is.
I love looking at those photos, dude.
Yeah.
I like when, it's, if you guys find one, tag me. When I like seeing I like seeing the photos of the old toy stores, the old comic stores. Like, I just want to see freeze frames of time. You know what I mean? Like, I saw this old still of a, I think it was maybe like a KB's back in the day. And it just like the fresh, when they were just putting the Turtles figures out. You know what I mean? And there's like other Playmate stuff like Barnyard Commandos and like all this stuff. Sure. And I'm like, dude, I just love like the nostalgia. Like, you know what I mean? It's stuff, so cool, man.
Absolutely.
Retro.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's like a famous photo. I'm pretty sure I might have to look it up. So yeah. June Cleaver, and she's like yelling at the kids about reading comics in the Brady Bunch. And like, she's holding up like a comic of Fantastic Four #1, literally.
Oh, wow.
Wow. I'm sorry, Leave It to Beaver. So in Leave It to Beaver, she's like yelling at the kids, like, you should stop reading these comics. And she's literally throwing around a Fantastic Four #1.
Yeah.
And everyone's like,
oh, that's
I know. Everyone's like, what are you doing? And she's like, this is garbage. Like,
that's $100,000.
Yeah, like, swinging. She throws it around. Yeah. June Cleaver. Yeah. She's yelling at Wally for like keeping comics. And she's literally throws like a Fantastic Four #1. Very clear as day. Everyone's like,
absolutely.
What the heck, man?
Comics are part of American
that is so
pop culture
funny,
now.
dude.
Pop culture, absolutely.
Leave It to Beaver. Don't read these things.
Yeah.
So back to kind of like the next step for the best Archie comic ever. I mean, it comes out tomorrow. By the time this podcast comes out, it'll have been out for a little bit. Because we record a little bit ahead of time.
You can still get it at your shop. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what we're saying.
Every shop in the world will have it. So
it'll be there. Cool. Yeah, that's what I was going to say is like, it's still an Archie comic. I mean, it's still always available everywhere. And are you guys planning on is this a long run? Is this like an extra kind of step, or what, how is this going to progress from here?
This one's fun because it's actually only a one shot. So it's like like this blockbuster superhero one shot. So like I said, it's actually an amazing value because you get the 3 stories in. It's kind of like treat it like as an annual. You know what I mean? It doesn't really have
absolutely
link to other stories, but it could spin off to other stories. I'll say this: it is a one shot. It's only $4. It's a steal of a price for what's the content that's in it. And in my story, there there's a first appearance of a villain. It has a new villain in the book. So it's a key issue as well for Archie. So it's got a lot of great things going for it. The interiors on my story were done by Georgia Spacito. So all of us were paired. It's like a teams of 3. And she was who I was paired with, and she did fantastic. And Georgia, you've seen her work. If you read like the Titan Doctor Who comics, she does a lot of the interiors for them. So that was the artist that I was paired with. So I thought we made a great team, and our story was wonderful. I loved how all the work she did. And so it's a one shot. So just get it on the news, on the comics in your comic shop. I was gonna say on the newsstand, I guess, but like just get it at your comic shop, and you'll dig it. And there's 2 covers. So there's the cover A, the Tim Seeley one, and then there's a cover B done by Tom Whalen. And Tom Whalen's cover's cool too. Tom Whalen has done a lot of action figure box art for like Hasbro. He did like some of the Power Rangers stuff. I think he's doing some G.I. Joe stuff. He did do some G.I. Joe stuff. I think he did the Zartan box art for the Hasbro exclusive G.I. Joe classified figures, I think.
Wow. Okay.
So he just done a lot of cool art. A lot of his stuff is digital, but it's got a cool style to it,
Okay.
So is the Tim Seeley the standard cover?
Yes, Tim Seeley's the cover A. That's the one that I showed you guys.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that'll be the one with Archie kind of like busting out and everyone's just like,
pose.
So look for it on your stands where you see it just literally leaping off of the page.
Yeah.
And aside from that, I know that that Ruben has Metahuman Comics, right?
Yeah.
That's his comic book shop. And we were looking at your like subscription boxes too. Like, is that something that you build and then you send out to people? Is that the idea?
We send that everywhere. If you don't have a local LCS, we could be your local LCS. We'll ship you monthly. We honestly send you twice as much as what the value of what you're paying. We just send a lot of comics, comics, graphic novels. It doesn't say it on the thing, but sometimes we'll throw like sealed pack of Pokemon cards. We'll throw pins. We'll throw like your box will just have all kinds of fun goodies in it, basically. And you just open your box and you'll have, and also when you subscribe for the Metahuman subscription box, you can kind of tell us your preferences. So like if you're like, hey, just want to let you know I'm kind of a Spider-Man kind of person, then like cool. we got you.
Tailored a little bit.
Yeah. You're like exactly. We can kind of customize it, and we put those notes before we ship your box out. So you're not getting like a ton of stuff that you're not even into. You're getting stuff that like you're actually like it's in the vicinity of what you're into, So
well, and the other idea that the reason why I mentioned that is because the idea of the podcast was to kind of tell people to just branch out a little bit. There's a lot of other comics and comic stories out there. Just because someone says, "No way, man, I'm all Marvel. I've seen all the Marvel movies, and that's all I'm going to do." Yeah. It's like no, like. There's so many of those themes and stories that are relatable across other publishers and other new things coming out. People are testing the waters a lot in comics now where they're, like you are, like merging different artists and merging different writers and just trying this, trying that, see what sticks, not necessarily, but also just to keep it as the ultimate creative medium. It's always supposed to be a creative medium.
Like Archie's such a character that has so much opportunity. Why not do a superhero thing? Why not do spies? Why not do
try it all, bring it out. And that's what I think a lot of people are excited for, that they're not just like always expecting one thing. It's just a variety within each publisher, and you can really just jump in wherever you want, and not even just the one publisher. I mean, we've always talked about that as like, that's great that you're a Dark Horse fan, or that's great that you're a the big 2 fan, but there's also awesome indie comics. There's also great collections. We just reviewed Mouse, and I was surprised by how many people are like, what is Mouse? And I'm like, man, that is one of the staples of the comic world. It's like
it's been around.
That brought the Eisner, I mean, that just brought it at the Pulitzer Prize. So it's like there's so many things that you could just spend a lifetime getting into. So that's why we were excited to be connected with even just the Archie Comics brand in the first place. So it was like, oh man, like that's great. That's a legacy character.
Absolutely.
Kind of hearkening off what you said. I mean, that was something that we experienced when I opened Metahumans Comics, because we just passed 7 years in business. And as of a few days ago, we got the nod. We got our second Eisner nomination for our store, Spirit of the Eisner Award.
Wow,
so
that's
at
awesome.
San Diego Comic-Con, we'll have our logo on the we didn't win. We're just nominated, but it's an honor to be nominated.
Yeah,
you know?
right.
Sure.
They'll announce whoever wins at the at the SDCC, right?
And I don't think we asked, but how did you start your store?
Yeah, so there had not been a comic book store in our county for well over a decade. When I at the point when I was getting ready to open it. So it's something I always thought would be fantastic and awesome. And in my community, I do a lot of different things that don't exist here. And it's like, if no one's going to do it, if you have to just take action, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Absolutely.
I did it myself, like, because it wouldn't exist without it. You know, even I started a comic convention here, the first ever one. That never happened. Wow, now that we have a comic convention, you know, there's a skate park here that we have, and kind of right from the point where I retired from professional skateboarding, I made it a giant goal of mine to get a skate park made. And after many years of fighting for it, we got like a $2.5 million grant. You know what I mean? And I was the only skateboarder on the committee. And I fought that. Wow. I fought for that thing, you know? Exactly. So like, yeah. And now there's a skate park here, and it's not for me. I mean, honestly, even when I skate here, I don't go there. It's usually all the youth that's there. I'll go skate on my own by myself somewhere. I did that for the youth and for the kids, you know? Exactly. And so you just have to take action, do those things yourself. And so I did that with the comic book store because there wasn't one. And now we're on 7 years. And one of the beautiful things, kind of harkening off to what you were saying earlier, is like that there's so many independent titles. And so when I opened the store, I had two different types of customers. I had customers that had never read and this sounds crazy, they've never read a comic book before. They've never owned one. All right. I believe it. Yeah. It's nothing. It's to them. It's like, I don't know. I don't even know where to start. All I know what Spider-Man is because of the movies, right? Yeah. Batman.
They're like, you show me.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you tell them anything else independent, if you're like, do you know what Saga is? They're like, I don't know what the heck you're talking about. You know what I mean? So like, and that's a reality, you know?
Yeah.
And then we had our second type of customer who was like someone who had genuinely read comics, who was, you know, older, who had them when they were younger. You know what I mean? So they were
there was this generational gap a bit.
Yes. So when I opened the store, I essentially became like curators, you know? And so I introduced a lot of independent stuff to a lot of, you know, the community here. You know what I mean? Like in the beginning, I was making sure to carry a lot of the independent publishers. I carried Archie Comics, you know what I mean? Which you couldn't find the regular release titles. You could still find the double digest and stuff, but I carried Archie titles, and I carried like Valiant, which you couldn't find. And nobody knew Valiant here in an area until we brought it in. You know what I mean? Like examples like that, where like we were like introducing these things, and you know, people were familiar with Spider-Man and Ninja Turtles and Batman and all that, but they also still couldn't get the comics. So I'd made sure I brought all that, and I kept bringing independent things from a bunch of different independent publishers. There's a lot of people who, you know, made their own comics and they weren't even published, and I carried them. They don't even have publishers, and I carried them just because it's like, come here on this day, you know, do a little signing. Let's pitch your book. I'll carry it on my newsstand. I'll buy some copies off you. You know what I mean? And
sure.
And now we've got an indie section in my store that like it's non-published. It's just indie creators. I love that. I really believe in helping people. I know what it is to try to get yourself out there. You know what I mean? And so anything I can do to assist in that process, it makes the difference to them. And those creators blossom because of that, you know, and they get the confidence and they build it. And it's fun watching their work get better through the years too, you know, whether they're artists or writing. The majority of the time they tend to be artists. You know what I mean? That seems to be the direction. I'm not a good artist. I've always admired that, but I have always been writing stories since I was really, really little. So, yeah.
Well, and that sounds like, you know, the spirit of the spirit of the Eisner Award. That's, you know, that's perfect, because that's the spirit of a comic book shop, of what it should be. You know, not only just a community, you know, magnet for people just to congregate and talk and learn, but like, you know, you have to also say, if you are interested in a character, we're going to find out what's the best way to get into it together. You know, you don't want people just to start just randomly grabbing things. And
I guess that echoes off the question I wanted to ask, like, what is your advice about how to build up like a community for like a comic book community, I guess? Do you have any advice?
Well, I mean, in our case,
I guess,
in our case over here, it didn't exist. So we started from scratch, but pop culture is so big that like, it wasn't too difficult to really build the community, because we had all these people that like like didn't have a place to go. So like even when I started the comic convention, the first year we started, I announced we're gonna have like a cosplay contest, and I made like a cash prize. I don't even, what was the first? I think that it was like $100 or something for the first year cash prize. It was like a starting first year we did. And wow, like so many people were excited because they're like, I've always known about cosplay. I've always seen the videos. Now I get to do it right here. And
wow,
I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I don't have to like, you know, most people can't get into San Diego Comic-Con, and we're like 2 hours away from San Diego. But if they're local, they don't have to leave their comfort at home, and they can enter our convention guaranteed, you know what I mean, for a lower price and have fun. Now they're here. And it's amazing how many people from the shows that I did, the Comic-Cons and stuff that we threw here, watching it grow from like first year of, 300 in attendance to like the last year we did before COVID hit, we were in the thousands, like the low thousands. That's
amazing.
Yeah.
So like, and the people that would come that were local that started here, because by the last show we did, it wasn't local anymore. We were getting people driving down from Palm Springs, San Diego, Arizona. But the first show we did, it really was like a lot of local people. And a lot of them became friends on that day because they were like, oh, you like to do this too? I like to do this too. Oh, you live in the city next door. Hey, my name's this, my name's that.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you're like 3 blocks from my house. Yeah.
Yeah. What the heck? You know? And so like, you got like this community that starts to build there. You're really building like lifetime friendships, because those kinds of bonds, I mean, they're indescribable. I mean, that's why I have so much joy going to conventions, because you're in this place, big or small, and you're in there knowing that everybody that's in there, they're not like scoffing like, oh, you like that stuff. No, they're in there because they're like, dude, you love all this too. I love it too.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. It's always fun to meet new people and just see that. Like,
and the big draw is that everyone, it's almost like you want to just say like, that's why we sort of start the podcast out is like, what's your origin story? What's your draw? What's your like, original drive? And it's cool that people still have like stories saying, well, let's see, 25 years ago, I was really hooked into Spider-Man, and it's like, they're still reading, it's like, it just becomes part of like their blood a little bit, and that's, why we like to connect. Like you said, you love connecting with writers and people at conventions. That's why we like connecting to just creators and collectors and just people who are like sort of in it, but also like wanted to learn a little bit about the other side of it. A lot of people say, well, if I get a review or if I hear that someone else says this is great, you might not know me, but like, this is an awesome book, try it. We're always surprised by how many people just say, okay, cool, I'm going to go try it. Like they just need that little step of like you said, a little pat on the back. Like it's okay, man. Like try this out, let me know what you think, and it's not just like, try it out and then we'll never talk again. It's like, that's what it is. It's becoming, a good community builder and a good connection point for everybody.
Yeah.
It really, really is. And that's not, and like, like you were saying, like it's the level of what it is. It doesn't even matter. It could be a small show. It could be a big show. You're going to connect with people regardless, because you're in that setting, Yeah. And that's just a beautiful thing. It really, really is. And I just adore it. I mean, this is like what I'm immersed in. This is what I love. I've always loved it. Even when I was skating for a living, when I was younger, I was still immersed in it. A lot of my board graphics had influence of pop culture stuff. You know what I mean? It's always been like that, So I've just had a love for it. And going all the way back to when I was a little kid, even when I was like playing with action figures and toys, I was building stories and creating worlds. You know what I mean? So it's all intertwined. I've been doing it. You know what I mean? I've been doing it for a long time. So to get to do that now and write for a living is a beautiful thing, because I mean, what I love the most about writing is that you can make these billion-dollar budget movies that, you know what I mean? You have no restrictions on. You can take characters, you can put them in space, you can create subterranean worlds, you can do whatever you want. You don't have that limit of what you can do in your story, because you're writing it out, and the artists are incredible enough to draw it out. You know what I mean? It's not like you have to pay extra for CGI or whatever. I mean, someday maybe your story gets picked up and then it does become a movie, and then a studio is willing to invest the money to make that. Fantastic. Even more of the dream following through. But for the most part, just writing it out and doing it in the comic book format is an absolutely beautiful thing that makes it my favorite format out of anything that exists, you know what I mean, in literature, you know what I mean? So I just adore comic books, you know, and I love the history of them as well, you know what I mean? So
absolutely, there's so much to learn from.
Yeah, and you can really just write any story you want. It's comics. It'll happen. Make it happen.
Yeah.
All right. And then my last question for you, as we're starting to get towards the end, if you could write any character, any franchise, dream, what would you write?
You know, I've always been a massive Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fan.
Okay. Yeah.
And anything involved with that would be cool. Like the turtle books that I read growing up were the Archie ones. Even more, you know what I mean? Archie's just always been in my life, you know? A lot of people forget that Archie published the Ninja Turtle books, you know?
Yeah.
They had the license for like a long time. So I've always been a big turtle fan. I mean, writing anything to any capacity, that it wouldn't even have to be the actual series. It could be like a spin-off series with like Mondo Gecko, you know what I mean? Or like, it could be anything, just anything would be beautiful. I got to do the PandaCon thing, which is, I guess that's sort of like doing it, right? Because he's a character that was from the Ninja Turtle world.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just a big Ninja Turtle fan, you know? I mean, I don't even know if you could see this in here. That's Donatello's head from
I saw it when it first opened. I was like, oh, there's a Donatello head in the back.
Yeah.
That's his head from the third movie.
Oh wow! Oh my!
Yeah,
was that like a on set prop or something? Like
yeah,
that?
this is the one that had it was like the stunt head, but it had some electronics on it at one point. But so this was done by the All Effects company, which is the company that took over after Jim Henson. Unfortunately had passed away and left. But I also own the Leonardo suit from the first movie, which is like the Holy Grail, because that's the whole thing.
Oh my gosh.
But that one's in a crate though, because I need to get like one of those
like a
cases. It has to be like
box,
a temperature sensitive, like the ones you see in the museums and stuff.
Oh yeah, right.
That one's been restored, so that one's beautiful. And someday I'm gonna set that up. That one I'll probably never let go, because that's it. I'm not kidding. It's like a whole thing. It used to be owned by Kevin Eastman.
Yeah,
awesome.
That's awesome.
So I'm a big turtle fan. I have a first printing, CGC 9.8 of the first appearance, which is like, that thing's really gone up in price, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just got a lot of cool. You know, that was turtles, like my thing. You know, Archie, Turtles, like TMNT.
That's the era you fell into, and of course,
we're excited. Hopefully, on a future episode, we're going to review or talk about reviewing The Last Ronin.
Yeah, that's on our list.
Oh yeah.
So that's on our short list of things we're like, when it comes out, we got to do this.
That graphic novel, I think, is coming out in September. Is that what you said?
July, I think. July.
Oh, next
like
month.
Summer.
All right, we're game.
Fantastic.
About that. We can't
wait.
Well,
Ruben, this has been awesome. So
thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, guys.
And remember, you got to have the 100-year Archie party at the store, right? It's Metahumans Comics. We'll say it now. Metahumans Comics have the biggest Archie party, 100-year Archies at the comic store.
Absolutely. On social media, where can we find you, Ruben?
You can find me at Ruben Narjera. It's just my name, RubenNajera. That's on Twitter, Instagram. On Facebook, it's Ruben Narjera Jr. And it's the same thing, just facebook.com/Ruben Narjera Jr. And then there's RubenNarjera.com, which is my site, which is going to have a couple things. I'm working on an original IP right now, my own comic story with these these Mexican superheroes who cross the border and they do amazing things. I'm working on that right now. I'm actually done. I actually finished. I'll just say that. But my artist has already taken over on we're doing all the concepts for the characters and stuff. But that's coming up. And that's pretty much it. Yeah, just those things on social media. And I mean, thank you for having me, guys. And best Archie comic ever. It's out tomorrow, but it'll already be out by the time the show comes. But for everyone that's there, just go to your local LCS. You should still have copies there.
Go find it. It'll be there.
Yeah,
you'll dig it. It is a super value for what it has in the contents of it. You'll enjoy it. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate you all.
Yeah, thank you, Ruben.
This has been another great episode of Bam Pow Comic Hour with your hosts, Dan Guada,
Chris Ramos,
and
Ruben Narjera.
Signing off.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.